Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Cabinet Vision Guy. In today's episode we're going to continue our series on rendering and we're going to create from start to finish an architectural render. And we're going to show how we can make something that looks like this into something that looks like this. And I'm not quite sure what this is because obviously I haven't done the render yet, but I'll put an image on screen anyway. Now, I wasn't quite sure whether to do this video and put it out at the start of the series or near the start, or whether to put it out at the end of the series. And the reason is, a lot of the things that we're going to do in this video, we're going to have as a separate video itself. So for example, when I come to dress this render, we're going to insert some models, and we're going to have a separate video covering how to set up those models ready to be inserted into an assembly. We're also going to have separate videos covering things like lighting for daytime scenes, lighting for nighttime scenes using user lights. And again, these are all things that we're going to touch on when we're creating this scene here. So to start with, what I'm going to do, and the first thing that I like to do when I'm creating a render, is I like to place a camera and essentially just get myself a camera point to always go back to as a starting point. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to go to camera from 3D view. And I'm going to grab this here, I'm just going to stretch it out, and I'm just going to literally diagonally drag this camera out, stretch it across here. I'm going to change my height to be about halfway up the wall, and I'm going to change my height and target height to be the same. And I'm going to change the camera angle to be about 45 degrees. In fact, I'm going to go with about 50. And then I'm going to hit preview, and that gives me the option of just previewing the camera scene. And I can see this is kind of how I want it to look, but I can see here on the right hand side I'm seeing quite a bit of wall. So what I'm going to do is, just selecting with the middle mouse, I'm going to drag it across, because what I want to do is I want to capture more of this bookcase that I've got on this left hand side. There we go. And when I'm ready to, what I'm going to do is right click and just choose Save View and hit OK. Now up at the top here I can click Select and select View 1. And at any point, if I just spin this round, I can go back to that just by clicking on View 1. When I'm rendering, what I like to do is have two sets of layers set. I like to have whatever I use on a daily basis that might have things like my dimensions on it, or my operations. So this would be the one that I'm using when I'm sending through to drawing and stuff. But I'll also have another layer system set up here, and this one is just dedicated for rendering only. And the reason why I've got a separate one set up is, what I tend to do is, if I just go and have a look at the layers, I'll tend to have anything that I don't want to see in the render, it seems pretty obvious to say, disabled. So I might have things like operations and things, CAM, machining information turned off. If I just go and have a look at some of the hardware, for instance, if I can find it in my list, if I go to edit, I can also enable and disable certain pieces of hardware. So for example, if I'm doing a render, there's no point seeing all the connectors because probably not something we want to render. So we'll tend to have that disabled. And what I'll tend to do with this is, if I'm doing a render, I'll tend to have the layer set up so it just looks nice. And if I want to, I can then delete that layer, schedule afterwards, and then just recopy my original one and then play with it until I'm happy with my render. So it's always worth having one there that you're happy to just dispose of and you don't kind of use in anger for your drawings page and stuff. Okay, so back to the render itself. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by doing the render. So typically with a render or an architectural render, what I'll do is I'll preview the render at a couple of points as I'm making modifications. What I'm going to do in this video is preview it several times just to show you what it looks like after each particular render, or each modification that we make. So if I just go and hit preview, it'll give us an idea of what it looks like. Now what I can do with my system, and I'll take you through on a separate video, is already have textures set up for a floor, walls and a ceiling, but I wanted to show you the process that I typically go through of how I create something from scratch. So you'll also see with this render that at the moment we've got minimal lighting in there. So yeah, we're going to set up some textures, some lights, and then dress this and add some models in. So to start with, I'm going to go and apply some textures to begin with, I think. And I'm going to add some textures to the wall. And I'm going to go with a darker colour on the walls, which I'm liking quite a lot at the moment. And then I'm going to go back into textures. And then on the floor, I'm going to go with the wooden floor. Again, I personally like to have a few different floors and textures set up that I know that look nice in good combinations. if I just take a look at what I've got set up here, we'll tend to have a good seamless or a good selection of seamless textures for flooring. And again, we'll have a separate video about how to set up a texture and what makes a good texture and what makes a bad texture. But for now, I'm just going to apply this to my floor. And then I want to make sure that I've got a texture set up for the ceiling and for the moulding as well. So these are just coming out as white at the moment, but I want to make sure that I've got my blank white selected. And I'll do the same for the mouldings. And I'll do the same for the ceiling. I'm not sure which one I selected first. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to render and I'm going to do my preview render again. And again, I typically tend to do a preview render maybe after I've set up the lighting. But as you can see, as soon as I start to add some textures in there for the walls, the ceilings and the floor, the render just starts to come alive a lot more. So the next thing I need to do is add in some lighting. And if I just go back for a second. So to set up my lighting, I'm going to head into lights. And currently what I've got is a sunlight present in my room. We can set up automatic lighting inside Cabinet Vision, but I just wanted to show you the process and how I'd go about lighting something like this on a daytime scene. So what I've got is one directional light set up in the middle of my room. And that's set just below the ceiling, shining down. You can see that we've got the vertical angle in here. I'll just go -90. Now what you will see on the lights that I'm introducing into the room is I'm ticking the option, and what this does is when we go back into 3D, we've got the option under our layers to show lights, and this just gives us an idea of where we're placing the lights within the room. And it's really good if we're new to rendering, not quite sure how to set up lighting, maybe our first time, and we're not sure about how the effects look. The first thing I'm going to do is grab my sunlight here, and I'm just going to make sure I've got the power set to 5, so I want this quite low. The vertical set to -90, I want that about -25. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up the end point and I'm going to start to drag this in the direction that I want. And what I want to do is essentially shine the sunlight through the windows that are coming in here. Obviously I've already put the windows into this room, but I try and make sure that I've always got, obviously on a daytime render, a light source within the room that we shine in some light through. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce another couple of lights, and I'm just going to move them to outside of each window, and I'm going to change these from a point to a directional, and the vertical, instead of shining directly down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to 0, and I'm going to enable show in Xrender as well. And I'm going to come down here and take a look at my sunlight. And I'm going to change this one from about -52 to about -60 for the angle, and then I'm going to make sure that this light is set to the same. And then I'm going to click on this one and do the exact same thing again. So I'm going to go for a directional light. I'm going to go -0 for this one, sorry, and then -60 in here. And what I'm also going to do with these is just set the height of them to be about halfway up the wall. So I'm going to go with about 1500. And then the same thing in here, 1500. What I can then do is close this down. And I'm going to run my preview again. And obviously we instantly see a difference. We've got some nice sunlight that's creating an effect on the floor for us. We've also got the same effect that's coming in on the side of our assembly. Our directional light is creating some nice shadow effects for us coming across the ceiling here as well. And from here, I think this is going to turn out quite nice once we're ready to hit render. So I'm happy with the lighting that I've got set up at the moment. We do have some user lights that I'm going to enable probably at the end for the underneath of the assemblies and within the wardrobes, but again we're going to do a separate video on how to set those up. So the next thing that I need to do with my render is I need to start to dress this area and introduce some models. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to plan view, and I'm going to start off by introducing the models that I want to introduce onto room level, and then I'm going to go through and dress each assembly individually, or well through elevation view. So if I go into objects, into decorative models, and obviously I've got some models saved away that I've built up in my system over time of creating some of these renders. But I'm going to go and I'm going to head into lighting. And what I've got is a group of spotlights that I like to introduce into a room. And if you haven't seen it, go check out our video on grouped assemblies and introducing those. The same is true for decorative models, so we can introduce things like light fixings and groups of models all together. So if I drag in my lighting group, and I'm just going to drop this about here. And what I can do when I'm placing this is if I just select my lighting again, and I'm just going to left select, what I can do is right click and choose to move. And whenever I'm placing anything into a room, what I like to do is just hold Control, and it allows me to drag and drop wherever I please. So if I just click in here, you'll see that that moves away nicely for us. So if I just check out how this looks in 3D, and go back to our camera view, you'll see that we've now got some lighting that's coming through the ceiling. These have got bulbs introduced for them as well, but we've actually got those set to 0, so they don't give any effect on the render. It's purely just for the graphic of having the light up at the top. So the next thing that I want to introduce is I want to put something really on this floor space here, so I think I'm going to put a rug down here. So if I go to Plan View, into Objects, into Decorative Models, I think these are in General. Yeah, there we go, and we've got a couple of different rugs that we can add in. So again, I'm just going to drag and drop this in. And I'm going to hold Control and just drag this to the center. And what I want to do is I just want to spin this around. So I'm going to grab this point here and just turn it around through 90 degrees. And again, I'm going to pick up the center point, just hold Control, and then drag that roughly so it's in front of the wardrobes that I've got there. The next thing that I need to do is I need to start introducing some models to dress some of the assemblies. So again, if I go back to my View 1, and again, I'm just going to do a quick preview render to see what this looks like. But what I'm going to see on this is it's going to look really nice, obviously, but I'm going to have quite a lot of empty space in the assemblies. And really, to get this looking realistic, I need to start to introduce some nice models and really break up this area around here. So to do that, I'm going to go into Elevation View for the assemblies. And I'm just going to cycle around until I find the walls that I'm looking for. And I'm going to go into File, into Preferences, and one of my favorite preferences with Cabinet Vision is the option under Layout, and this is Sections of the Assembly in the Elevation. And what this allows me to do, if I just turn off my snap marks, is double click on any of the assemblies and get down to Section Editor. So now it's as if I'm on assembly level, and what I can do is I can go to Section Interior, I can click in the space that's available, and I can select Object, into Decorative Models, and in this one, I think I'm going to start to introduce some books, I think would be good. So I'm just going to add this in. And what I'm going to do is just build up this scene. So if I pick another object into Decorative Models, and in here, I think I'm going to put in a hi-fi in this. So if I go Electrical Accessories and take a look, we've got some speakers. And I'm going to insert those. So I've got a set for the left-hand side. If I go back to Objects, insert these. And on the right-hand side, I'll put the other set of speakers. So I think I'm going to build this up with some ornaments next. So if I go to Objects and into General Accessories, and we've got our Gorilla ornament, always makes it into a render. And then down here, I think I'll put in maybe another set of books. Let me have a look. And essentially what I've got with the models that I've set up here is there's a couple of different ways of introducing a model into a scene like this. We can introduce using this method, just using the model itself. And when we do that, essentially what it's going to do is it's going to stretch to be in the height that we want in the center here. What I've got set up, and we're going to have as a separate video, is how to use these models and introduce them into another container so we can get this effect here where the model is within a good size for this opening. So once I've introduced a couple of different things into this assembly, I'm now going to double click on this one across here, and I'm going to follow the exact same process. So I'm going to go to Section Interior, I'm going to click in the space that's available, select an object to insert, and then choose whichever one I want to put in there. So with this one, I'm going to go back into Electrical, I think, and then go into insert these on the right hand side. And at the moment it's probably taking me longer to decide how I want to dress this render than it is to actually insert the models and get it how I want. And a lot of this again is subjective. Sometimes we can introduce too many models and the render can start to look cluttered, so we need to cut it back. And sometimes obviously we can have big open spaces where we need to fill it with something. So let me find, I think I've got a hi-fi to go in here. And on this one as well, I want to use a foam dock as well. Make it a nice modern scene. And we'll put some more books. And all I'm doing essentially is clicking in the space that's available and then just deciding what I want to insert. There we go. Now for this centerpiece here, what I want to do is click in this one and I'm going to insert something slightly different into this. I'm going to put some pictures in. So if I go to objects and again into decorative models, and I've got a picture and a set of pictures ready to insert. So I can just click in here. There we go. And just add these in. I also want to introduce a chair to this area here, so I'm just going to hit return. And for this one I'm going to do it a little bit differently. And because I always make, or I wouldn't say always, I like to add a dressing table into my scenes, and it's a regular product that I do. What I'll typically do with something like this is I'll choose to replace the assembly. And then I've got a preset setup where I've got a mirror on top, and then I've got one with a chair underneath as well. So I'm just going to introduce that and swap these out. And then if I head into 3D and into view 1, we'll see that we've now got some accessories starting to break up this render. I've also got on the right hand side a set of wardrobes that I want to dress. So if I go back to elevation, and I'm just going to flick around my room here. There we go. So on this one, I'm going to go section interior. In this space that's available, I'm going to go with objects, decorative models, bedrooms, and I'm going to go with the double clothing insert for this one. And up at the top here, I think we'll put in some storage boxes. So if I go into office accessories, there we go. And I'm going to do the same on this side. So on this one, I'm going to introduce, I think probably one item of clothing. There we go. And all I'm doing to introduce that is just clicking on the plus, and it'll automatically put it in there for me. So in this one, I'm going to break it up again, I think. And on this side, I think I'll go with objects and see what else we've got in here. So I think we'll put in a couple of handbags as well. I'll try and be stylish. There we go. And in here, I'm just going to add in some shoes as well. There we go. So if I add some trainers. And actually, I'm going to return around because I know I've missed an area. And I'm going to head back to wall 1. Sorry, this one. And I'm going to double click in the space that's available just for the seating area. And I'm going to go section interior. And I'm going to do the same thing again. And I'm going to introduce some shoes into this one, I think. And again on this side. And again with a render, what I like to do is make sure that I don't have too many models. But what I want to do is just, I want to make sure that I don't have any areas that draw my attention where I've got a big empty space. So if I go back into 3D and into view 1, and again, I'm just going to preview how this looks now. And I'm pretty happy with that render now. So what I'd like to do is, I think I'd like to probably save my job and then go for a full render. So I'm just going to go and save away my job for a second. Back into 3D view. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and go to properties, and I'm just going to take a quick look at some of the settings that we're going to use on this render. So under the render settings, I've got 3 options for the quality of the render that I want to produce. And what I'm going to do is, before we look at the settings, I'm going to put on the screen 2 different renders. And the reason I'm going to do this is because there are 2 different renders, they're very different quality settings, and they took 2 very different lengths of time to render. But as you can see, it's very difficult to pick out the difference between the 2. Now, I'm not going to tell you the difference either, but one of the renders is rendered, I think, in 8K. It's got everything, the anti-alias, light sampling, reflection detail, everything set to 11. And if you want to, you can zoom right into it as an image and look at the reflection detail, I think on the plant pot on the right hand side. And I think you can even zoom right into the dog's face, for instance. Now on the other image, this has been rendered in sort of like 5 minutes. This is used with moderate settings that we've got here, and essentially you can't tell the difference between the 2. The only difference is that one of the images could be blown up to a massive size and probably put on the size of a wall, or you can zoom right into it to see the reflection detail in the dog's nose. And the other render is suitable for obviously presenting to our clients and communicating our design intent. So the settings that I'm going to use today for my render, I'm going to set my anti-alias in to 60. My light sampling, I just want that enabled, so I've got that set to 1, and the same for the reflection detail as well. I can also choose to, if I want, render this to a file, so we can render to a nice high definition image. For the time being, I'm just going to render this on screen. Under post-processing, I'm going to leave this turned off for now, and I'm going to do a separate video of how we apply post-processing to this render. But for now, I just want it to show exactly as it looks once we click the button render. So I'm going to hit set as defaults and OK, and then I'm going to go to render, and instead of a preview render, I'm going to click the drop down and I'm click full architectural. So now what Cabinet Vision's doing is it's working out all our lighting for us, all our reflection detail, and then it's going to start to render that on screen. Within each pass in a couple of seconds, what it's going to do is it's going to start to clean up the image and make it crisper and crisper and crisper. And I'm going to speed up this just so we don't have to sit and wait for the image, but I'll put on screen the speed that I'm using. And with our render finished, that's taken about 5 or 6 minutes on my system. And what we're left with is a really nice crisp image. We've got some really nice light and effects coming through on the floor and coming through the window. We've also got some really nice reflection detail on our assemblies and again across the floor here. And we've got a sort of moderately dressed room. I think the last thing that I want to show you that I forgot to add in is just to show you how I set up the background at the back of the window, because again it's quite important to have something realistic in the background here for our scene. Currently we've got a daytime scene, but in the nighttime video that we do, we'll see we'll change the background and we'll use the same room as well. We'll change the background and make this into a nighttime scene. So I can right click on here and just go to properties, and under the rendering that I'm using, so I can go to background and then just select a different image here if I want to. Hopefully you found this video useful. Feel free to give us a like, share and subscribe. Hopefully you'll be looking forward to the rest of the videos in this series breaking down how we set some of this up so we can create a render like this. Cheers!